What would you do if the one you loved waited for you every single day, for 4 years, not knowing whether you would ever return? This is the story of a loyal dog, a broken family, and the day when every unanswered question finally found its way back to the same old gas station. But what happened when the past walked back into the present was nothing anyone expected. There was an abandoned gas station at the edge of the town, where the highway wind always carried the scent of dust and fuel. Its windows were cracked, and its once bright paint had faded into a ghostly pale. Yet, every morning and every evening, a single brown dog lay near pump number 3, as if guarding something precious that no one else could see. He was thin, with fur that had lost its shine from sun, rain, and cold. His eyes, however, still held life, a quiet, unwavering hope, like a candle that refused to go out. The townspeople had grown used to seeing him. Truck drivers brought scraps of food. A schoolboy once tried to take him home, but the dog ran back to the gas station before the afternoon bell rang. He always returned, always to the same spot. No one knew his story in full, but some whispered that he had once belonged to a family who stopped there on a long journey, a family who spoke gently and laughed softly, a family who hugged one another warmly, the way people do when they are safe. The story said that on that day, the dog had jumped out of the car when the father stepped out to refuel. Something must have startled him, or perhaps he simply wandered a little too far. When he returned, the car was gone. The road stretched forward and backward, empty and silent, offering no answers. Ever since that day, he had waited. For years past, summer heat burned the pavement until it shimmered. Winter cold froze the puddles into glass. Rain washed the dust, only for more dust to settle again. Through all seasons, the dog remained. Sometimes, when the wind was gentle, he would lift his head at the sound of tires in the distance. His ears would rise. His tail would tremble. But then the car would pass, and his gaze would soften again, returning to its calm stillness. People wondered why he continued to wait. But deep inside the dog's heart, the memory of warmth still lived. He remembered the girl with soft hands who scratched his chin. He remembered the father's voice calling his name. He remembered sleeping at their feet. His loyalty had become a quiet monument. On a particular morning, the sky carried a soft golden glow. Mist lay across the ground like a silver veil. Birds called from the telegraph wires with voices that sounded almost unfamiliar, as if announcing something new. The dog felt a stirring inside his chest, a sensation he had not felt in many months. He stood up slowly, stretching his tired legs. The highway was empty, yet he kept his gaze fixed on the far horizon. Then, from the distance, a sound emerged, the deep, steady growl of an engine, not rushed, not loud, but familiar. The dog's ears lifted higher than they had in a long time. His tail began to move in small, slow motions, as though it feared disappointment, yet could not stop itself from hoping. A car approached. Its color, its shape, its worn edges touched something buried deep in memory. The closer it came, the stronger his heart pulsed, until his entire body was trembling. The vehicle slowed. Its tires crunched over the gravel. The engine quieted. The dog remained still, but his eyes were burning with a light that had been hidden for years. The driver's door opened. A figure stepped out. And for the first time in 4 years, the dog took a single step forward. The figure who stepped out of the car stood still for a long moment, as though the weight of memory pressed down upon their shoulders. The morning mist shifted around them, and the quiet hum of the engine faded into the air. The dog stared, chest rising and falling, with eyes that held 4 years of waiting. There was no bark, no sudden leap, only a deep, silent recognition echoing between two lives. The person was a woman. Her hair had more strands of gray than before. Her clothes were simple, travel-worn, and her face carried the kind of tiredness that grows from searching too long. She looked toward pump number 3, at the place where she once stood, at the moment when everything had changed. Her lips parted, yet no sound emerged. The dog moved another step closer, slowly, carefully, as though afraid the world might vanish again if he moved too quickly. The woman knelt, placing her hand gently on the cracked pavement. The dog lowered his head, inching forward until his muzzle touched her fingers. His breath was soft, trembling, almost disbelieving. The world around them felt as though it had paused. Birds stopped calling. The wind held its breath. Even the distant highway seemed to fall silent. The woman finally spoke, her voice barely louder than the breeze. "I came back." The words were fragile, almost broken, but real. The dog leaned into her hand, and something inside him that had been waiting for years released, like a tight, not finally loosening. He closed his eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. Yet, time has a way of changing more than appearances. People are shaped by absence. Memories shift. Roads diverge. Behind the woman, the car door opened again. A young child stepped out, holding a small stuffed animal. The child looked at the dog with wide curiosity, then up at the woman, confused. "Is this him?" the child asked. The woman did not answer immediately. Her gaze was fixed on the dog, and her mind was traveling through long corridors of memory, through laughter, through regret, through the long miles of searching that had finally led her back to this place. The dog lifted his head and saw the child. Something changed in his expression, a flicker of something gentle and curious, but also something cautious. The child took a step forward, but the woman gently placed a hand on their shoulder, stopping them. Not yet, not too fast. Some reunions must breathe slowly. A quiet warmth began to settle between them, like the first soft glow before sunrise. But then, from across the road, a sharp sound broke the stillness. A single horn, a truck turning in too quickly, tires scraping gravel. The dog's head turned. The woman's eyes sharpened. The moment of peace trembled, delicate as glass. The truck slowed, its engine rumbling as it pulled into the station. The driver stepped out, tall and weathered, his boots heavy on the pavement. He looked at the dog, then at the woman, and something flickered in his expression that did not belong to this quiet reunion. He knew something, and the woman recognized him. The wind picked up. The mist began to fade. The air grew tense, as though the earth itself sensed a shift. The dog stood between them now, his stance steady, protective, yet uncertain. His memories, his loyalty, his fear, and his hope were all tangled together inside his chest. The truck driver opened his mouth to speak, but before the first word left his lips, the sound of a distant siren rose from the road beyond the hill. Not loud, not hurried, just approaching. The woman's hand tightened slightly. The child pressed closer to her side. The dog did not move. The morning sunlight continued to rise, slowly illuminating the broken gas station sign, the worn asphalt, the waiting hearts, and the unanswered questions that hung in the air. The moment stood on the edge of something about to change. And then the scene held there, suspended between hope and uncertainty, without yet revealing what would come next. The siren grew nearer, threading through the air like a signal of something inevitable. Yet no one moved. Not the woman, not the truck driver, not the dog, who stood in the quiet space between them, as though holding the moment together. The child shifted slightly, gripping the stuffed animal tighter. Their eyes flickered from the dog to their mother, searching for reassurance. But the woman's gaze remained fixed on the man who had just arrived. He removed his cap slowly, as if acknowledging that time itself had finally caught up with this place. His face was hardened by sun and years, but his eyes carried a weight of understanding that cut deeper than words. "You came back," he said. His voice carried no accusation and no welcome, only reality. The woman's breath trembled for a moment before she steadied it. "I never stopped looking," she replied. Her tone was quiet, but strong in the way a person speaks when they have walked far, suffered long, and refused to give up. The dog looked from one human to the other. He knew both voices, both scents, both pieces of the same life once shared. The siren faded, passing by on the highway, leaving only the distant hum of road and the soft whisper of wind brushing through tall weeds around a gas station. Silence returned, but it was not the gentle silence of before. It was heavier now, filled with things unsaid. The truck driver stepped closer, his eyes lowered to the dog. "He never left," he said. "For 4 years. He slept right there, through heat and storms. I tried to bring him home more times than I can count, but every night he came back to this exact spot. The dog's ears moved slightly, acknowledging the memory. The woman's hand shook just enough to show how much her heart was struggling. She knelt again, placing one hand around the dog's neck. He leaned into her, slow and trusting, as though time had not broken what was once whole. The child crouched beside her, hesitantly reaching out. This time she allowed it. The child's small fingers touched the dog's fur. Warm, real, alive. The dog's eyes softened, and the child's expression brightened with quiet wonder, as though feeling something sacred. But the truck driver's gaze did not soften. He looked past them, toward the road stretching beyond the station. His jaw tightened just slightly. "You know, it is not only the dog who waited here," he said. "There are things tied to this place. Things that did not end when your car disappeared down that road." The woman did not look away. She held the dog gently, steadying herself with the warmth of him. "I know," she answered, her voice steady now. "That is why I came back." The air seemed to thicken, carrying the weight of a truth still unrevealed. The truck driver opened the truck's back door. Inside, there was something covered by a thick, dust-worn blanket, large enough to matter, small enough to be carried. He paused before uncovering it. His hand hovered above the fabric. The dog stared. The woman's breath grew shallow. The child leaned closer. Even the wind seemed to wait. Then, just as he began to lift the corner of the blanket, a sudden movement drew every glance away. Another car was approaching from the direction of the highway. Its speed was steady, its path deliberate, its arrival unmistakably significant. The dog tensed. The woman rose to her feet. The child stepped backward. The truck driver lowered his hand from the blanket and watched the vehicle come closer. The car slowed. Its engine quieted. Its headlights dimmed. No one spoke. A door opened, and the person who stepped out stood in silence, as though the entire world had been waiting for them to arrive. The air held perfectly still. The dog took one breath, then another, and the story balanced on the edge of what would happen next. The person who stepped out of the car remained still for a moment, standing between sunlight and shadow. Their presence altered the atmosphere in a way that was neither loud nor dramatic, but deeply felt. The dog's posture changed first. His body lowered slightly, not in fear, but in recognition of voice he remembered even before the sound came. His eyes sharpened with the fragile alertness of long-buried memory rising to the surface. The woman stared. Her breath paused. The child clutched her sleeve without understanding why. The truck driver exhaled slowly, as if this was a piece he had known would eventually arrive. The newcomer stepped forward, their footsteps cautious on the gravel, as though afraid the ground itself would reject their return. They wore a long coat, worn at the edges, carrying dust from many roads. Their face was older, more weathered, but unmistakable to those who once shared a life with them. The dog took one step forward, then another. The movement was careful, like approaching a memory he feared could disappear again if reached too quickly. The newcomer stopped at the edge of the old fuel pump and lowered to a kneel. They did not speak at first. Instead, they simply opened their hands and let them rest against the ground. A gesture of invitation, of apology, of something more complicated than either. When the dog reached them, he did not leap. He did not cry out. He simply placed his head against their chest and stood there, breathing slowly, as if listening to the heartbeat he had never forgotten. The newcomer closed their eyes. They remained like that for a few long, silent moments, the kind that feel like the world has stepped aside to allow something deeply human to unfold. The woman's expression shifted. Relief, pain, memory, and something unresolved. The child looked up at her, sensing that whatever was happening was larger than words. The truck driver stepped back, leaning against the pump, his face unreadable now. Finally, the newcomer spoke. "I thought he would forget me." Their voice was quiet, steady, and full of years. The woman answered with equal weight. "He remembered every day." The newcomer looked at her, eyes scanning the lines time had drawn upon her face. "You left too," the woman added, not with anger, but with a truth that had lived inside her for far too long. The silence that followed was not empty. It held everything. The newcomer stood slowly, one hand still on the dog's back. They looked at the child next, their gaze lingering, puzzled, realizing how much had changed while they were gone. The child took a small step behind the woman. The dog looked between them all. His heart was wide, open, trusting, but also sensing the currents moving beneath the surface. The truck driver cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention back to the blanket-covered object in the back of his truck. "We still have unfinished business here," he said. The woman's hand tightened slightly, as though bracing herself. The newcomer did not move, but their eyes narrowed, remembering something they had tried hard to forget. The dog sensed the tension and moved to stand between them all again, protective, watchful. The truck driver placed his hand on the blanket once more, but before he revealed what lay beneath it, he spoke with a voice low and grounded. "Before we go any further, all of you need be sure you want to see what comes next, because once this is uncovered, there is no walking away from the truth." The wind rustled through the tall grass. The sunlight stretched slowly across the pavement. The distant road hummed like a quiet pulse beneath the world. No one answered. "Not yet." The dog looked up, waiting. The woman inhaled slowly. The child clung closer. The newcomers steadied themselves. The truck driver's hand gripped the edge of the blanket, and the moment hung there, suspended, just before the world shifted again. The truck driver's fingers pressed into the fabric, but he did not lift it yet. He looked at the woman, the newcomer, the child, and finally the dog, as if measuring whether all of them were prepared for what waited beneath the blanket. No one spoke, yet everything was being said in the silence. The sunlight crept across the cracked concrete, inch by inch, revealing the years etched into the station's forgotten walls. A quiet breeze stirred the dust, brushing across their shoes, across the dog's fur, across the blanket that hid the unresolved past. The dog stood perfectly still, his tail lowered not in fear, but in awareness. He could sense something approaching in the air, something tied to the reason he had waited for so long. The woman held the child's shoulder gently, grounding them. Her eyes remained on the truck driver, though her thoughts were far behind her, retracing steps that had led her away from this place, and the steps that had brought her back. The newcomer shifted slightly, one hand resting on the dog's back, drawing quiet strength from that familiar warmth. They looked tired in the way a person becomes when they have carried something heavy alone for far too long. The truck driver finally lifted a corner of the blanket. Beneath it, there was an old metal lockbox. Its corners were dented, and rust had spread across its surface like fading scars. Time had not been kind to it, but the lock remained intact. The woman's breath caught. Her hand tightened. The child looked up at her, sensing something had changed, but not understanding what. The newcomer stepped closer, but not too close. Their face tightened with recognition, and a quiet pain flickered behind their eyes. The lockbox was not ordinary. It was something that had once belonged to the family. The truck driver spoke slowly, with the weight of a man who had waited for the right moment to speak his truth. "This was left here the day everything happened." The woman nodded once, a small, nearly invisible motion, the kind a person makes when every part of them already remembers. The dog moved closer to the lockbox and sniffed it gently. His ears fell back. He stepped away and sat beside the woman again, his presence steady, as if telling them all that he was ready for whatever came next. The truck driver placed the lockbox down on the pavement. Inside it, there could be answers, or regrets, or something that did not belong to either, but existed between them. The newcomer knelt and placed their hand on the lid, but they did not open it. Instead, they lifted their gaze to the woman. "When I left, I thought I was protecting you," they said, voice low. The woman stared back, tears not yet formed, but waiting at the edge. "You thought wrong," she replied, not with anger, but with truth that had lived quietly in her for years. The child looked from one adult to the other, sensing the history in their voices, even if they could not understand the words. The dog leaned gently against the woman's leg. The newcomer took a slow, steady breath. Their fingers moved to the lock, but just before the latch clicked, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind the abandoned convenience store. Not hurried, not aggressive, but deliberate. Another presence. The dog stiffened. His ears lifted, his gaze locked onto the corner of the building. The woman turned. The truck driver straightened. The newcomer froze in place. A figure emerged from behind the store, moving slowly, carrying something in their hands. The sunlight stretched to meet them, drawing their shadow long across the ground before their face came into view. The lockbox remained unopened. The dog did not move. Everyone waited. The figure approached the edge of the station, just close enough for their features to become clear, and the moment stood poised on a threshold once more, just before the truth revealed itself. The figure stepped fully into the open, the light revealing an elderly man with weathered hands and a quiet, steady gaze. He held a small leather-bound notebook against his chest, the kind of person keeps close when it carries something too important to lose. The truck driver exhaled slowly, as though he had expected this moment. The woman's eyes widened in recognition. The newcomer straightened, tension loosening from their shoulders. Even a child sensed it. This was not a threat. This was the last missing thread. The dog rose, tail low, ears soft, and walked toward the old man. He sniffed the hem of his coat, then sat beside him, as if acknowledging that this presence, too, belonged to the story. The elderly man looked at each of them in turn, and his voice, when it came, was quiet and clear. "I was here that day," he said, "when the car drove away, when he stayed behind. I wrote everything down, because I knew one day you would come back." He held the notebook forward, offering it to the woman. Her hands trembled as she accepted it. The cover was worn, the pages filled with ink faded by sun and time. She held it gently, like something fragile, yet deeply alive. The truck driver opened the lockbox at last. Inside were the dog's old collar, a faded family photograph, and a house key tied with a ribbon that had long lost its color. The woman lifted the collar first. She turned it over in her hands, remembering the day she fastened it around the dog's neck. The day his journey with her began. The newcomer picked up the photograph. For faces once captured in a moment of laughter, each changed now by time, except for the dog, who looked the same. Their eyes lingered on the image a long moment before they set it down again, carefully, as though returning it to memory rather than to the world. The child touched the key. They looked up at their mother. "So this is home?" they asked. The woman nodded, tears gathering gently beside her eyys. "Home is not a place," she said softly. "It is the ones who stay with us, even when we are lost." The dog stepped forward and rested his head against her leg. The warmth of him brought her back to steady ground. The newcomer placed a hand on the dog's back. The truck driver stood close, quiet and present. The elderly man watched with the calm of someone who had waited long enough to see something finally put right. And together, they began walking away from the old gas station. Not rushed, not lingering, simply moving forward. The dog walked at their side, no longer guarding a place of waiting, but guiding the path ahead. The station remained behind them, silent and sunlit, no longer holding unfinished echoes, but resting in peace. The highway wind shifted, carrying only the scent of open road and warm earth. The sky stretched wide above, clear and bright. The dog lifted his head, feeling the air, the footsteps beside him, the quiet heartbeat of family returning to itself. He did not look back. There was no longer anything to wait for, only life to walk toward.